In 1.4, we'll talk about decimals. Now, a lot of times in algebra, we like things in the form of a fraction. It allows us to do certain things. But in your science classes, a lot of times they will use decimals. And we do use decimals in algebra as well, but sometimes we see more fraction form for values. Okay, but we're going to talk about decimals here. So the first thing we want to establish is place values. So say we have a number like 1,234. Okay, that's considered a whole number. You would put a comma, or you could put a comma right there after the 1 for the grouping part. And we would call this the ones place value, or the ones column. And then we have the tens, and then we have the hundreds, and then we have the thousands. And that's how those place values work. Now, in a whole number, then, the decimal is after the ones, so to the right of the ones, and that's the decimal point. And then we can have digits after that. So I won't be too creative here. 5, 6, 7, 8. So that would be a decimal number, 1,234.5678. Do something like that. Sometimes they'll put a little space every third digit after the decimal, just to make it a little bit easier to read. You don't use commas though. Okay, so how do the place values go? Well, the first one is the tenths with a TH. So there's no like ones. So it goes from ones, and then right behind the decimal is the tenths. And then the hundredths. And then the thousandths. And then the 10,000ths. And then on it goes. Okay. So what's important with this, one of the things that's important is rounding. So we're going to use what we call straight rounding rules. If you're rounding to a particular place, you look to the right. If the digits greater than or equal to 5, so if it's greater than or equal to 5, it rounds up. We say it rounds up. If not, then it's going to not round up. Okay, so let's give you an example here. So we have the number 6.582, and they want us to round to the nearest, and the first part says hundredth. So let's look at the number 6.582. I'll show you how to do this. And we're going to go to the hundredth. So here's the tenths. Here's the hundredths. Look to the right. You have a 2. So that's not 5 or more. So it's not going to round up. And so we're going to put 6.58. That would be considered rounded to the nearest hundredth. Okay? And that's the answer. Now, one thing that sometimes comes up, you wouldn't put, so don't do this, don't put 6.580, because then it looks like you've rounded to the nearest thousandth, and that's not what the directions said. So you want to show accuracy to the hundredths, and so you would just write 6.58. So don't do this if you were thinking to do that. Okay. Now, we take the same number, 6.582, the original number, and now we want to round to the nearest tenth. So we look at the tenths columns, and we look to the right, 8. So that's more than 5. So this time it's going to round up. So we're going to get 6.6. Again, we're just going to leave it like that. And then finally, we take the number, the original number, and we're rounding to the nearest, they don't say to the nearest ones, they say to the nearest whole number, which means the ones. Okay, oops, the ones. So here's your ones column, or the whole number column. We look to the right, it's a 5. That means it does round up. So to the nearest whole number, we would round that off to be 7. You wouldn't put a decimal point, you would just put 7. Now, one comment I want to make about decimal numbers real quick. So when we write, say you have the number 0.123, they want you to write that 0, okay? Especially if you're going into nursing, they're really big on that. So they don't just want a decimal point. It's too easy to overlook, and you want to be highly accurate in your measurements. So we would put a 0 and then the decimal point if we didn't have anything in the ones column, okay? So just a note.